You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, good evening. Happy Saturday evening. I'm live here in Nashville, finally doing a post game from my home studio now that I'm not standing behind a blank wall or in the dining room doing a quick one like I did for Virginia Tech. But welcome in. Vandy is huge victors on the road this time against Kentucky, winners by a score of 20-13. This game featured Kentucky as a double-digit favorite at home, and Vandy just obliterated every bit of that. Welcome in. I'm Corey Burton. Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making me your first listen. Thank you for joining me live. I'm excited. It's late. It's Vandy After Dark here, if you're wondering. But the comments are open. Jump on in. We got a great show for you guys. It's a lot to talk about here in this game. Lots to unpack. I think it was a very interesting game, a very on-brand game for what Vandy's identity is. So I really, really enjoyed it. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Yes, you can start the season with big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. So as I do each and every time I do this, I've only done this twice, but I didn't do it the first time. I did it last time. But as I'm going to start doing, we look back kind of at the keys to the game, the what I essentially call the game plan for what Vandy needed to do in this one against Kentucky. We're going to go through the checklist here, but we're going to see how they progressed. We're going to go through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then we're going to get you out of here, and I'll break this thing down more specifically on Monday, figure out what we learned about this Vandy team after this massive win and why it's massive. Not because it's Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky's a great opponent. They've been a really good team in this conference since Mark Stoops took over. But the fact that this happened on the road as double-digit underdogs is probably the more impressive part, because that was one of the keys to the game, right? So control the tempo and the clock, force Kentucky to drive the ball, win the turnover battle, and manage the road environment. So the turnover battle ultimately was won, but it was even for most of the game. So that one was kind of a wash. But what Vandy did a really good job with, and this was the keys to success I gave you guys on yesterday's show, but control the tempo and the clock, right? And that's always the main thing with a team like Vandy. I mean, they've got a roster that's a little bit limited, and Miles Capers was injured. Thankfully, he's going to be okay. Obviously, didn't finish the game, but he was carried off on a stretcher, taken to the University Hospital, checked out, was released, and was back on the sideline before the game ended. But so that was great to see. But the point being is this: Vandy has a limited roster right now, because they've got a lot of transfer guys. They lost a lot after last year's season, and they just haven't built it back yet. That'll happen. I think if they keep winning, they'll build it back faster than anyone thought was possible. But when you look at how this roster is built, it's not built to last in games like that, where things are happening so fast and things are going haywire. But so Vandy's identity, and I think they want to do this all along because that's what Clark Lee likes to do. He's a defensive guru, and he wants to be physical, and he wants to do that. But it's to control the tempo and control the ball, control the clock, right? And Vandy did a phenomenal job at that. They took it down 97 yards, what felt like an hour of possession, but they drove it down and put the first points on the board, right? Kentucky, they forced Kentucky to drive the ball too, right? They forced Kentucky to burn time. They forced them play after play after play, and you saw just kind of what this Kentucky offense was all about. You saw what happened when you forced Kentucky to make 3, 4, 5-yard gains, right? The series where they were able to hit these big chunk plays was the drives where they were able to get points or chance for points, right? But they just, again, this Kentucky offense just showed what it's shown all year long, and it played out just like I thought it would. Force Kentucky's offense to get in a rhythm and get in sync, and they just couldn't do it consistently. They would hit these big plays, and then the closer they got to the goal line, they would just kind of fall apart. Penalties, bad snaps and bad holds on field goals. There was one field goal they should have gotten that was basically a chip shot, and they fumbled the hold. They did the same on the extra point, which gave them made it a 7-point game instead of a 6-point game. They just miscues like that. They just out of sync, and some of that was just them unforced errors, and some of that was the fact that Vandy forced Brock Vandagriff to scramble around, and he made some mistakes because of that. It forced them to kind of press, and it forced Kentucky's pass protection to really kind of hold up. So when you force them, the drives in the series where they forced them to actually move the ball, methodically, they couldn't do it. And that's where defensively, that's where the game was won, because defensively they were able to force them to do that. Kentucky never really found a rhythm, and they never really clicked. For the most part, they clicked on a few series, but Kentucky still hasn't clicked over the course of a full game yet. So hats off to the defense. Great defensive game plan. Vandy found a coverage that was completely frustrating for Kentucky. I mean, they were just it didn't seem like they had any answers for it. But going back to the offense, I think the offense being able to move the ball with relative ease also put a lot of pressure on Kentucky's offense, because they're like, hey, they're driving the ball, they're holding the ball, they're chewing clock. We're not going to get as many opportunities, so we have to, they have a little sense of urgency where they're more of a methodical, control the clock type offense as well. So when they have to turn up the heat and go fast, they can't do that. Vandy is a team that's very much in control of their tempo right now, right? If they want to go fast like they did right before halftime, they can go fast like they did right before halftime. If they want to slow it down, chew up clock, eat it up like they normally do, that's what they did, right? And they only put 20 points on the board, which is in most scenarios in college football, that's nothing to have a party about. But the most important thing for Vandy right now is collecting wins, and however they can do that. Defense is playing well. You control the clock, you control the field position, and you're good to go. Pavia was on one leg for most of the second half, which is hopefully he can find Mr. Miyagi between now and when Texas comes to town, and they can do the little boom healer thing. But this was a very, very masterful game plan for Vanderbilt because they were able to, they seemed like they were in control of everything all game long, right? They seemed like they were, they never panicked. You never, like, I'm shocked because there's several situations where you could have looked over and Vandy could have been panicking, and they didn't. Pavia was as cool as a cucumber. Even like he took a sack, and that's not great. Lost like 12 yards, 15 yards of field position where they could have pinned them way back there on that last series, but it didn't matter. The defense was going to, the defense was after them and after Brock Vandagriff, and they had a great plan for that too. But it just, every time you'd get, Vandy was so good on third down, right? They were so good. He is a freaking dog, and Locked On Sooners, welcome, man. Tough run for you guys today. I hated to see that. I was hoping that was going to be, more competitive, but I guess that just speaks more to what Texas is all about versus, how bad Oklahoma was. But thank you for joining. But yeah, I mean, it's Pavia, dude, is he was 15 of 18, 143 yards. He threw 2 touchdown passes and a pick. That first touchdown pass is going to be one of those hang it in the Louvre type passes where, I mean, he eludes like 3 defenders. He's getting ready to scramble, and then just lofts one up to the receiver there, and that was amazing. And it was AJ Newberry actually out of the backfield, which I'll get more on some of the personnel groupings that they had today. But Richie Hoskins got in on the action. He had 3 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown. Junior Sherrill had 2 catches. Quincy Skinner had 2 catches. Cedric Alexander had 4 catches. Cole Spence had 2 catches. I mean, lots of guys involved. There was only 15 catches to be had, so it's not like anybody was going to jump off the stat page. But it's he's spreading the love, man. Diego Pavia also had 14 carries for 53 yards as well to add to his total. So that was good to see, man. It's just a total team effort here. First downs, they got 19 to Kentucky's 23, which total yards, Kentucky outgained them 322 to 288 in total yards, but a lot of those yards were empty yards for Kentucky. Just some yards right before half, some of those yards right there at the end of the game where they were driving a little bit, and the 2 scoring drives were pretty sizable deals. Rushing, they were about equal. Kentucky had 164 on the ground, and Vandy had 145. Penalties, here was the killer for Kentucky. Penalties, 12 penalties for 106 yards for Kentucky, and 5 penalties for just 57 yards for Vandy. 34 minutes of total possession versus 25 minutes of total possession. So it was fairly even, but again, Vandy won that. So if you can win the time of possession, you can have less yards, you can have less first downs than the opponent and come out with the win. They won the turnover battle 2-1, but it wasn't until the end there when they won it. It was 1-1 for a long time, but it was great to see, and it was great to see Vandy kind of overcome all of that and just get another big win on the road, because things were starting to get a little. Here's the thing about this, and this was one of the big keys to the game, right? Yeah, at least we have Vandy. I've never heard that before. It's not till Oklahoma comes into the league that we say at least we have Vandy. I love that. This is I've never heard that before, but here we go. All right, my keys to the game again of manage the road environment. I want to talk a little bit about that because this was the biggest thing for Vandy, I think, because I think they figured out some things with their identity-wise. I think they figured out some things in the run game. I think they're starting to kind of figure out some personnel groupings that they like, which I'll get to in just a little bit. And they're starting to figure out some things in the passing game that they like as well. So this offense is starting to kind of round out. They're starting to get more looks. They're starting to get more formations, and they're starting to get some wrinkles within their option game, which I absolutely love. And like I said, I'll get to that in just a second. But managing the road environment, man, that was something that I thought was extremely important to what they needed to do to be able to pull out this win, or to give themselves a chance to pull out the win, because Brock Taylor hit 2 field goals, right? He had a 50-yarder and a 49-yarder to push the leads, and that was amazing because he was able to. Again, it's road environments are tough to kick in, and against Missouri, he had a dreadful second half against Missouri because it's the road, right? It's a road game. And managing those environments are not always easy, right? And he did a good job of doing that. And he was able to hit those field goals. Which ended up being massive field goals to kind of push that lead out there for Kentucky and put a little more pressure on them, right? Managing the road environment, they were able to come in. Kentucky's a pretty hostile place to play. The grocery bag, which I affectionately name it, I enjoy naming it that because I just think it's funny because it's Kroger Field. It's the grocery bag. There's nothing derogatory about that. It's just something that I think is funny. But it's a tough place to play. It's a nice stadium. Their fans do a tremendous job at being impactful in the game. And so what Vandy was able to do early on was they were able to take them out in big chunks. That first touchdown drive where they went down 90, like the fans are jacked up, right? Because they had some success moving the ball, which is what they wanted, because they haven't really, their offense hasn't really had that consistent success throughout the season. They've had it in spots, but they've never really been able to put it together. Because if they had a consistent offense to go with that defense, they would have beaten Georgia for sure. I don't know if it would have mattered against Kentucky or against South Carolina because they just played dreadful all over. But they might have had, they might have put up more points against Ole Miss. That might not have been such a fluky game against Ole Miss. But nonetheless, they get that they move the ball, they get a little bit of positive momentum, and then they down Vandy at the 3. So their fans are freaking jacked up, man, because they're like, okay, yeah, they're down at the 3, hey, they're going crazy, and they're loud, and but Vandy, what do? No sweat, boom, first play, 3 yards, crowd's jacked up, and then with every play, the crowd gets a little bit quieter, a little bit quieter, a little bit quieter, a little bit quieter, and now they're just like, and then 97 yards later, and what felt like 75 minutes later, Vandy punches it in. Right? They put one across. So now it's 7-0, and the crowd's like, wait a second. This is Vandy, right? And they're 15 minutes, counting down. Ooh. They're like, yeah, I said 75 minutes, and Siri thought I wanted to set a timer, but they were like, whoa, this is Vandy, and they're not supposed to do this, and they did. And then they kept going. Yeah, exactly right. Did not bother the team. I thought Missouri was able to affect Vandy when they played them. But I think, every road trip they learned something new. Like the Georgia State trip was a total disaster, just all around. Team didn't want to be there. I don't know what happened logistically. The stadium wasn't well lit. The refs were terrible. Like the crowd just was non-existent. Like that game was an anomaly. That game was a disaster, right? Then you clean it up, you clean up the operation, you come back, you go on the road against Missouri, a little bit better, but like your special teams operations pretty terrible at Missouri. Just I don't know, like just road environments can do that to special teams occasionally. The crowd I thought affected Vandy at Missouri. And I think they were scrambled at times, and that kind of was the difference in the game a little bit, because in a tight game, those little moments can be huge moments, and those special teams moments loomed large in that game, right? And then you come to this road environment, and it didn't seem like they were phased, really. Like they were in such control. It was almost refreshing to see. It's like, okay, this team's functioning like a regular team, right? And yeah, there's no easy wins in the SEC. It just means more of less gimmies, right? There are no gimmies. I mean, Georgia proved that today too. Like Georgia proved that. Mississippi State's going to fight you, right? So I don't think there's a single bad team in the SEC. I mean, relatively speaking, yeah, by record, Mississippi State's the worst team in the SEC, but I don't think that's a guaranteed win for anybody, right? Because Georgia got up big on them, and they came roaring back and made that a football game. They fought, they showed fight, right? Vanderbilt, the Doors, man, I'd like to say I'm surprised, but I'm just not right now, because they're earning it. They're going out there and they're beating these teams, right? These teams, they're not catching anybody by surprise. They did not catch Kentucky by surprise tonight. That crowd was jacked up. That team was jacked up. They were hitting. They were coming after guys. They were talking trash. I mean, I thought there was a few cheap shots that were to be had that were had. But overall, man, this game was just physical. And this game was like, hey, you're not getting past us. Like, hey, you beat Alabama. We know what you're capable of, right? Vandy's not sneaking up on anybody anymore, or at least this year, right? They may come crashing back down to earth next year, this team. But as of right now, they are flying high. They are not under anybody's radar. They're going to start getting everybody's best shot, starting with this game we just had. And last week they beat Alabama. This week they beat Kentucky. Alabama didn't roll over. Alabama didn't play like complete garbage. They beat Alabama. I thought Alabama gave a pretty decent. I thought they could have played better. I thought their energy could have been better, but it wasn't. It was certainly not a rollover. This is why. It was no fluke. This game tonight that just happened was definitely no fluke, right? And Stock, you said it perfectly, man. Fluke wins, man. This team's playing winning football. They're playing straight to the identity of what Clark Lee and this coaching staff wants, and they are on the same page. They're lockstep. Diego Pavia is the unquestioned leader of this team, and they're just, good Lord, man. Like they get an A+ tonight. Okay, they do, because this team, I think this team 3 weeks ago would have gotten rolled in this scenario, right? If this particular game was played 3 weeks ago, Vandy probably gets rolled, because it's a jacked up environment. Kentucky comes with intensity, and Vandy 3 weeks ago, I don't think was ready to answer the bell with this type of game, and that's no shot to them. I just don't think they were there yet, and I think that when they got stunned against Georgia State, they didn't know how to react. They figured some things out between then and the Missouri game, and they went out and they stunned Alabama and did the same thing. So, they're learning how to play and how to win. And last week was, hey, we're going to learn how to beat an opponent that we shouldn't, beat a big dog, beat a number one team. We're going to learn how to do that. Okay, and we're going to learn how to do that at home. Like they learned in the first week how to win at home, how to win those adverse games at home. They hadn't yet learned how to win on the road. Tonight, they learned how to not only win, but finish a team off, finish a game stronger than you started on the road. And that's how they closed out tonight against Kentucky. It was no fluke. This game was no fluke. You can ask Coach Stoops. You can ask any one of those Kentucky players. This Vandy team won in the trenches for the second week in a row. They won in the run game. They crammed it right down their throat in the run game, and they earned it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They earned this game tonight. They earned it. Any respect that they get, they deserve it. Any disrespect they got after the Georgia State game, they earned that. But they used that as fuel. And then they came out a near road win against Missouri. They just weren't that Missouri game was just proof that they weren't quite ready to win. But they learned from their mistakes in the Georgia State game. They carried them into the Missouri game, almost won that game against the top 10 opponent. It was on the road. They let the road environment get to them a little bit. They made some small mistakes. They didn't finish that game. They took that and said, hey, next time we're in this position, we're going to finish this game off. Well, lo and behold, 2 weeks later, by way of a bye week, they were in this position. They finished the freaking game. They started it. They finished it. They dominated in the trenches the whole way through. Tonight, same thing. They never trailed. They were always in control of that game, even when it was tied. And they just absolutely put their stamp on the SEC this week. The SEC's on notice now. Vandy's good. Vandy's a good football team. And you can't – I know they have their flaws, okay? And I'm going to get to those in just a second. They have their flaws. But Vandy's a good football team right now, okay? They are. They absolutely are. They're 2-1 in conference, 4-2 overall, and they're a good football team right now. They're playing extremely well. I don't know when – I don't know what will happen next. They got Ball State next week, but it'll be something that each week you're going to be like, this Vandy team's just getting us like a snowball. It's going to snowball, right? So before we get out of here, I got about 6 minutes left. Let me talk about some of the scheme-specific stuff that I really liked from this game, or some of the specific aspects of what I saw in this game that I really liked. So the 20 personnel, 21 person, actually, technically it's 21 personnel, but they had 21 personnel in different type formations. But I'm a big fan of Newberry and Alexander on the field at the same time with Stowers and Spence. 22 personnel with one receiver. I'm all for that, right? I'm all for 21 personnel, right? With Junior Sherrill, Quincy Skinner, and then the two backs and Eli Stowers. I'm all for that. I love that personnel group because AJ Newberry is so dynamic. He can do a lot of things. And the touchdown pass he caught showed that he's a threat in the pass game. He took a few screens, and he's a tough runner too. Like he is. And when we were talking about this in the preseason, I was like, okay, if Vandy's going to be successful, they've got to carve out a role for AJ Newberry. They've got to find ways to get him and Alexander both going on the field at the same time. We knew it was going to be those two guys, and they were going to lead the charge. And I'm a big fan of what AJ Newberry is doing. He's been a tremendous, tremendous asset to this team, and you'll see more 21 personnel groupings, and you'll see him doing different things within the pass game, and he's kind of like he's gonna be kind of, well, him and Stowers both are gonna be like the Swiss Army knife, so you can't really key on anybody. But one thing I want to mention, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, but Cedric Alexander, dude, there was two blocks in particular that he laid in that game, which you could hear it on the TV broadcast, and then when they replayed it, it was like a gun being shot off. I mean, he destroyed not just a tiny cornerback that weighs 100 nothing that doesn't want to hit anybody. It was a linebacker and safeties that he was running over like they were nothing. There was a play where Diego Pavia, they were in it was into the boundary. It was like a trips formation with a nub tight end, which means when I say nub tight end, means there are no receivers over on that side. And it was like a quarterback lead play. It was like a zone QB lead play. And it was Pavia all the way. There was no option. He just caught it, took a half step, and then went. And Cedric Alexander led him. And when I tell you that the guy went flying, he hit him. He hit this defender, and the defender goes flying backwards, and Pavia gained like 20 yards because of it. It was insane. And then he does it later on in the game, and you're just like, did he just do that again? Like you heard a hit, and then you saw 28 standing there, and you're like, yeah, I think he just did it again. So hats off to that. And hats off to this offensive line. Good Lord. They were creating some holes. This group is playing together. They're playing clean. They're communicating. This quick side, strong side deal is, I think, is working tremendously. And they are just crushing people. And they're creating run lanes. Like everyone knows what's going to happen. And they can't do anything about it because this Vandy offensive line is dominating. Like everybody knows they're going to run it, and they can still run it. Everybody knows what Vanderbilt wants to do. Everybody knows that they want to get Pavia out on the edge to throw the ball. They all know that they're going to run option football. They can't do anything about it because this offensive line is playing really, really well. And I've been impressed with them. Coach Kleinakis has done a tremendous job with that group. And this is and it's shown. The record shows, the offensive production shows that this offensive line is doing a tremendous job. So hats off to them. Defensively, I thought they played a really good game plan against this offense. I think, this offense is one that's looking for a spark. They want to move the ball. They want to be a methodical team. They just don't really know how. They don't know how they want to do it. They don't know. They just don't know how to execute it quite right consistently. Now they're good. Brock Vandegrift made their production. They outgained Vandy. So they're just not good consistently. They're not good when it matters. They're not good in certain scenarios. They get too many dang penalties. They're off. When you get their protection breaks down on in passing situations where they're going to throw it. I think the whole switching the quarterbacks thing can get a little clunky as well. But Yeah, I think in spurts they're really, really good. They have the potential to be a really good offense, Kentucky. And I thought Vanderbilt did a good job of making sure that they didn't have that consistent production. They knew with Barryon Brown and Key and Macklin and those and the running backs that they have, you knew they were going to get some production. You knew they were going to move the ball a little bit, but you just didn't know how. You just didn't know when. And I thought Vanderbilt did a really good job of getting pressure and dictating when they were able they were able to limit the consistency of Kentucky's offense, and I think that was the biggest thing. So check on the game plan. All right, lastly, Brock Taylor hit 2 field goals. I think I was so excited and just quickly typing that I meant to say he hit 2 more field goals, but Brock Taylor hit two big field goals in this game to push the lead. So hats off to him. Hats off to special teams. Hats off to Ashby for he made a big tackle on a punt coverage that knocked them deep. I think it was late in the fourth quarter. Vandy had a punt. Julian Ashby, he went down and covered the punt and made a massive tackle. They ended up getting a block in the back, and then they ended up having to punt it away. And Vanderbilt was able to ice or to milk some of the clock away and give themselves a chance to win. Without that coverage and without that play by the long snapper, you don't get the win. So hats off to them. But I'll leave you with this. Vandy is a good team. So wrap your head around that. Vandy is a good football team. Do they have their problems? Yes. Could they shore up the middle of their defense a little bit? Yes. But they are selling out to stop certain aspects of your offense. And if you can counter those, you'll have some success. But ultimately, this team has been really good at adjusting defensively. They've been really good at getting pressure. They've been really good at doing a lot of different things defensively to take away what you do well. And it seems like they're well scouted. They're well coached. They're well scouted, and it shows. So this team's a good team. Like I said, it's weird. Vandy's a good team. They're a viable team in this conference. And get used to that, because I don't think they're going anywhere this year unless, I don't know. I don't think they are. So that being said, we hope you have a great rest of your evening. It's late. Go to bed. LSU just knocked off Ole Miss in overtime, which that was a fun game as well to kind of check in on. But LSU just won a big game there. So they're still a good football team. There's a lot of good teams in this conference. Vandy is one of them. There are no bottom dwellers. I don't even think Mississippi State by record's a bottom dweller, but they're not really. They don't play like bottom dwellers. If you let them hang around, they'll get you. So, but anyway, that's it. We'll hope you have a great night. See ya. Catch me tomorrow. We will. I'll catch me on Monday's episode, and we'll. I'll break this thing down a little bit more, and a little bit more specifically, and we'll get it going. So, good night. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time on the Locked On Vandy podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network. Peace.